The Project Gutenberg ebook of A Short History of the Worshipful Company of Horners, by H.G. Rosedale. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you'll have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. Title: A Short History of the Worshipful Company of Horners. Author: H.G. Rosedale. Release date: December 28, 2016, ebook number 53820. Language: English. Character set encoding: UTF-8. **** Start of this Project Gutenberg ebook short history. Company of Horners ****. Produced by the online distributed proofreading team at http://www.pgdp.net. This file was produced from images generously made available by the Internet Archive. A short history of the Worshipful Company of Horners. Price 5 shillings net. London, Blades, Easton Blades, 23, ABCHURCH Lane, EC. January, 1912. The Worshipful Company of Horners. Master: Charles Eves, Esquire, Capel House, 62, New Broad Street, EC. Upper Warden: W. B. Cranfield, Esquire, 6, Poultry, EC. Renter Warden: Captain L. G. Marcus, CC, 65, London Wall, EC. Court of Assistants: Mr. Deputy Millar Wilkinson, Seaton Ross, Christchurch Park, Sutton, Surrey. Sir David Stewart, Banchory House, Aberdeen. *W. Spencer Chapman, Esquire, The Cottage, Warminster, Wilts. *KWTIMBRELL, Esquire, CC, 44, King William Street, EC. *Drive W.J. Hill, 25, Craven Street, Strand. WC *H. Burt, Esquire, J.P., Parkfield, Potter's Bar. *Call. Sir J. Roper Parkington, J.P., D.L., 58, Green Street, Park Lane, W. *WPHENE Neal, Esquire, C.C., 62, London Wall, EC. *PHPWIPPELL, Esquire, LL.M. B.A., 4, Paper Buildings, Temple, EC. *J. Dix Lewis, Esquire, J.P., 85, Gresham Street, EC. Reverend C.C. Hoyle, M.A., New Westminster, Canada. Cecil Hartridge, Esquire, 17, Old Broad Street, EC. H.S. Foster, Esquire, J.P., Grosvenor Mansions, 82, Victoria Street, Westminster, S.W. J.T. Edmonds, Esquire, 19, Great Winchester Street, ECWR Taylor Carr, Esquire, 108A, Cannon Street, ECA Goodinge Williams, Esquire, Union Place, Stonehouse, Plymouth. Major Charles Wallington, V.D., 4, Token House Buildings, Bank, ECGR Blades, Esquire, 23, Abchurch Lane, EC Ald. James Roll, Adelaide Place, London Bridge, EC Reverend H.G. Rosedale, D.D., FSA, 7, Gloucester Street, Victoria, SWAF Blades, Esquire, 23, Abchurch Lane, ECE Parnell, Esquire, Delvin Lodge, 14, Wickham Road, Brockley, SE Call. And Ald. Sir W. H. Dunn, 11, St. Helens Place, Bishopsgate, ECGR Glenfield, Esquire, 58, Canfield Gardens, Hampstead, N.W. Reverend H.T. Carr de la Fontaine, M.A., 49, Albert Court, Kensington Gore, S.W. James Webster, Esquire, 38, Wickham Road, Brockley, S.E.Q.T. Taylor, Esquire, 9, Wood Street, E.C. Horace E. Bowles, Esquire, 66, Bishopsgate Street, E.C.A.H. Michel, Esquire, 5, Devonshire Place, W. M. R. Sowell, Esquire, C.C., 2, Porchester Square, Hyde Park, W. James Curtis, Esquire, 179, Marylebone Road, N.W. Hahn, Chaplain. Reverend H. G. Rosedale, D.D., F.S.A., 7, Gloucester Street, Victoria, S.W. Clerk and Solicitor. Howard Dayton, Esquire, C.C., 44, King William Street, E.C. Those marked asterisk have served the office of Master. Illustration, Shield. Preface. The discovery of the old book of the Worshipful Company of Horners, which has probably been missing for some 250 years, has brought added interest to the consideration of what is, perhaps, the oldest of the city guilds. In studying the documents and compiling the account of that book, recently distributed to the members of the company by the kindness of the late master, Mr. Edmonds, I was drawn to take in hand the lengthy and difficult task of reconstructing the life history of this interesting craft guild. Such a work is the product only of years of patient labor, but, in the meantime, at the request of the court, I am glad to offer some preliminary details which may serve at least to show the age and dignity of the Worshipful Company of Horners. I have endeavored, where possible, to incorporate passages from the late Mr. Compton's paper before the British Archaeological Society, but, owing to many discoveries having been made which were not at his disposal, I have had to take a different course in some respects. I wish, however, to state that this short history cannot in any sense be considered a complete or even sufficient account of the company, but must hide behind the expressed wish of the court that, in this instance, it should be of modest dimensions. H. G. Rosedale, D.D. Illustration. Casket presented to King Edward VII. A short history of the Worshipful Company of Horners. Side note. Origin of guilds. The study of guilds, their origin and development, is amongst the most fascinating of all literary pursuits, but not many whose names rank high in the world of letters have gone deeply into the problems which the subject presents. The early days of guild life, at least, in this country, are still to some extent shrouded in the mists of speculation. Whether craft guilds came to England from the far-off glories of Greece and Rome, whether they were the descendants of the early Saxon or Danish blood brotherhoods, or even derived partly from the one and partly from the other, is still a moot point. There are practically no records of any importance of craft guilds in this country before the arrival of the Normans, though during the time of the Roman occupation there must have been many such extant. At quite an early period of the Roman occupation, we know that the Guild of Smiths, Collegium Fabrorum, existed in this country. At a later period it is clear that England was covered with a network of frith guilds, but whether these were trade guilds in the accepted sense or not has yet to be shown. It seems probable, however, that they were agricultural guilds enforced upon the inhabitants by their Saxon conquerors, and that in the more populous neighborhoods and towns, craftsmen and merchants were included under their own special tithing, or possibly even had their own hundred. Whether this were the case or not, it will be obvious to all that in Saxon and Norman England alike, wherever several persons were plying the same trade, there must have existed some sort of organization for mutual protection and for the instruction of others. Throughout the known world from the very earliest periods, workmen of the different classes have always formed their own aggregations and have always associated themselves together for mutual assistance and protection. The need for something of this sort must have been very urgent in days when there was less security to life and property, and in days when, as we are led to suppose, The Saxon rulers felt scant sympathy for the towns where trades would be found to exist most extensively. Side note: Antiquity of guilds in England. The more we study medieval life in our own country, the more impossible it becomes to imagine any regular trade as existing apart from some official or semi-official organization, combining one or more of the following obligations: control of the workers, education of novices, civil representation, generally through some influential patron or head, and nearly always carrying out the work of a burial and insurance society. That such a banding together of those, whether merchants or craftsmen, interested in any particular occupation, must have existed during the Saxon period with the object of promoting one or more of the objects mentioned, is hardly open to doubt. It would be specially in the towns, such as London, in which, as Sir Lawrence Gombe has pointed out, the Roman ideals of organization still persisted, even into Norman times, that guild life or its analog would be most definitely marked. Side note: guild, not guild. Such societies, unions, or combinations for common interests, whether of trade, religion, or social needs, were called guilds, the word being derived from the Anglo-Saxon _gilden_ or _guild to pay, an allusion to the contribution demanded from every member towards the common fund. Side note: Antiquity of the horner's craft. It may be justly claimed that amongst the earliest trades or crafts of this country was that of the horner, who was indispensable to the community, inasmuch as he was the purveyor of many articles absolutely necessary for domestic purposes. In the days, for instance, of Kings Anna and Alfred, metals of any kind were rare and consequently costly. Articles required for eating and drinking, such as cups, plates, forks, etc., as well as vessels for the preservation of liquids and powders, were made from horn, that being the least expensive and the most easily attainable material for those who had risen above the use of wooden articles for similar purposes. Side note: Laws of Ina. That trades did exist throughout the Saxon period is clear, nor should it be doubted that among the more important of those trades was that of the horner. Indeed, though little else of a commercial character is alluded to in the laws of King Ina, AD 688-726, those laws lay down the price at which horns are to be bought and sold, and thereby indicate the importance of the horner to the community. Bovis cornu decim denariis valet vac cornu duopus denariis valet. No mean price, surely, at that early period. Side note: horn tenure. Not only are horns mentioned in the early Norse runic inscriptions, see _Deutsches Literaturzeitung, April 2, 1910, but there have been, from the earliest days, many well-known instances of beautifully worked horns used as a method of conveyancing property. Ulfos horn, a drinking horn now at York, is, perhaps, the best-known example. It was presented by him to the church in token of the conveyance of his lands to the church authorities. King Edgar granted privileges to Glastonbury Abbey by means of a horn. For a very long period the family of Pusey held the village of Pusey by virtue of a horn, given to William Piccoli by King Canute. Edward the Confessor granted the rangership of Burnwood Forest, Bucks, to be held by a horn, while Randall de Machines, 3rd Earl of Chester, conferred on Alan Silvestris the bailiwick of the Forest of Virall by delivering to him a horn, which was ever after preserved at Houghton. Ingulphus, Abbot of Croyland, mentions the horn amongst those things whereby land was conveyed in the Conqueror's reign. This recalls the lines of Wordsworth in the Horn of Egremont Castle. Eustace pointed with his lance to the horn which there was hanging, horn of the inheritance. ****, who of right claimed the lordship, by the proof upon the horn. Side note: drinking horns. Both Pliny and Czar allude to the elaborate horn cups of their period. Johannes Salisburensis tells us that the Danes used horns as well as the Saxons, and Heraldus Cambrensis mentions the horn of St. Patrick. Sometimes these horns were so skillfully made that they could be used both for blowing and drinking. vid Chaucer's Frank Tale, L. 2809, and drinketh of his bugle horn the wine. Perhaps, however, the most interesting and historic horn cup was that which Wiglaf, king of Mercia, gave to the abbey of Croyland, Cornumensuazut, etc. The horn from his own table, that the elder monks might drink out of it on festivals and saints' days, and that when they gave thanks, they might remember the soul of Wiglaf the donor. Ingolphus mentions that when the monastery was almost burnt down, this horn was saved. Side note: medical horns. From Payne's English Medicine in Anglo-Saxon Times, we ascertain that during the 10th and 11th centuries, at least, the horner's trade was called into use by the apothecary. The author relates that in cupping operations and the administration of clysters, horns were used, indicating a nicety of manufacture which must have placed the trade on a high level. Side note: importance in Saxon times. To such a pitch of development had the trade of a horner attained at least 250 years before the Norman conquest, that even the patens and chalices used at the church services were made of this substance, as may be evidenced from the fact that at the Council of Chelsea, held AD 789, after careful discussion, it was decided that the chalices and patens used for ecclesiastical purposes should no longer be made of horn, but of metal, no doubt to distinguish them from similar articles which had already come into general use for common and domestic purposes. At this time glass was probably almost, if not entirely, unknown in England, and, in consequence, thin sheets of horn had to be manufactured to serve many of the purposes to which glass is now applied. These facts, and the general tendency of town life in this country, make it practically certain that long before the 10th century the horner's trade, in common with some others, was in full swing, and with it that which we may deem inseparable from any considerable trade at that time, something in the nature of what we now call a trade or craft guild. Side note: horners probably the oldest city guild. Both tradition and documentary evidence are agreed that the Horners Guild dates back to the far-off ages of antiquity, and we may justly claim that its foundation is as early as, if not anterior to, any of the existing city companies. Side note: Old Book of the Worshipful Company of Horners. Considerable light has been thrown on the vicissitudes of the Horners Guild by the recent discovery, as well as recovery, of the most interesting and ancient manuscripts book already alluded to. The existence of this book, which formerly belonged to the company, and was, in fact, its official record, was brought to the notice of the clerk of the company by Dr. Warner, of the British Museum. After many negotiations between Mr. Howard Dayton and the then owners of the volume, it was purchased for the sum of £40. A detailed account of this precious possession has been given in the form of a publication entitled, Some Notes on the Old Book of the Worshipful Company of Horners, which was distributed to the members of the company and their guests at their last livery dinner, by the late master, Mr. J.T. Edmonds. The records relating to craft guilds in the 11th, 12th and 13th centuries are very meager and difficult to discover. The Old Book of the Worshipful Company of Horners has proved extremely useful in helping to build up a consecutive history of this extremely early guild. It demonstrates the fact that at least as early as the 14th century, both horners and bottle makers were taking their full share of civic and commercial life. Side note: the guild in Saxon days. Probably, during the Saxon period, the workers in horn, in common with other craftsmen, were enrolled amongst the members of the Frith Guild and not differentiated until the Anglo-Norman period. It might even be admitted that the Horners Guild was a subdivision of one of the many guilds merchant so prominent as mercantile forces in the 11th and 12th centuries, but it is more than probable that before the end of the 11th century, so important a trade as that of the horner would have begun to assert itself separately and individually. more especially as there does not seem to have been any larger or more important guild under which it could have found shelter. Side note: Horn Fair, 1268. Side note: Horner Statutes in 1284. We do not know whether the Horners Company had any connection with Horn Fair, which took place at Charlton, in Kent, and for which Henry III granted a charter in 1268. Of this fair, Philpot, writing in 1639, tells us it was called Horn Fair because of the great plenty of all sorts of winding horns, cups and other vessels of horn there bought and sold. We are, however, on sure ground when we point to an interesting proof of the great antiquity of the Horners Company, which comes to us from the official letter books of the City of London. In Letter Book A, Full, 40, 12th Edward I, September 8, 1284, we find that the ancient guilds are drawing up rules for revision by the authorities, an event which, no doubt, took place every few years in early times. The entry includes the following. The same day the said John Passomers received the statutes of the Horners for correction. Side note: Notable Horners in 1303. In 1303, 31st of Edward I, an incident took place which illustrates at once the prominence of Horners at the time and the variety of persons who were members of the guild. The royal treasury at Westminster had been robbed. Richard of Pudligote and William du Palais were accused. During the inquisition held by the Bishop of London, it transpired that amongst the friends of this Richard were several persons, notably one, Jacobus le Horner et Boten Armanens apud Candlewick Estret, whose character is described thus. It is unknown whether they were aware of the felony, T.N. male creduntiis, _a.e. They have a bad name. As a set-off, however, against this undesirable person, it is recorded that two other Horners, viz., Rogers le Horner and Stephanus le Horner, succeeded in arresting Robert le Convers, another actor in the drama. Side note: Notable Horners in 13th and 14th centuries. Throughout the 13th and 14th centuries there is frequent mention made of Horners, many of whom seem to have been persons of great importance. In 1284 we have recorded the name of Thomas at or de Corner, and in 1285 Clement le Horner. In 1295, of William le Horner, and others are mentioned in the years 1226, 1320, 1342, 1346, 1352 as doing some official act. This frequent mention of Horners to be found in early records does not apply to London only, but to other places. For instance, Peter le Horner, resident at the Hayward, Cambridge, is mentioned as paying taxes in that town in 1314–1315. Side note: 15th century. In 1441, 20th of Henry VI, we are told that, at the instance of Simpkin Horner of London, together with two others, the king directed letters to the mayor and bailiffs of Hampton Sandwich, asking how Englishmen repairing to Pruss, Ans and Dansk are treated. Well might a learned legal luminary, delivering judgment in 1692, say, "A Horner is a particular trade and a very ancient company in London." Side note: Horners take bottle makers under their protection. In the year 1362 the Horners were in so flourishing a state that another craft guild, the bottle makers, who, as we read in the MS. book just referred to, dated back, like the Horners, to time out of mind, found it desirable to place themselves under the protection of the Horners Company, and, for a period of 115 years, remained under its protection, until, in the 16th year of Edward IV the two companies became amalgamated. The interesting document which authorized the fusion of the two companies is to be found in Letter Book 50, Full, V, of the City of London. It praised that the company of bottle makers, which had been for some time intimately associated with the Horners, be united with it and become one and the same company, and, that from henceforth the said persons of both the said crafts may be as brethren and occupi and joined together as well in all things to be born and doon within the said city, as in observing, etc. The petition to the mayor and aldermen was granted, and from that day forward the 3 bottles as well as 3 horns have emblazoned the arms of the Horners Company. Side note: important record. In the very ancient and interesting book belonging to the Horners Company, there are 2 early entries relating to the period during which the 2 companies were legally separated though in a certain close relation to each other. The entries, which are identical, are as follows. The bottle makers have continued in the company of the Horners 149 years and 9 months, written the last day of November anno 1550 and then. Side note: Horners, the 26th City Guild in 1376. Following upon this remarkable evidence of official recognition as a craft guild, carrying with it all the legal privileges which were later conferred by recorded charters, we find as early as 1376 an entry of the fact that the Horners Guild was recognized as the 26th out of 48 mysteries of the City of London, and successively sent 2 of its members to the Court of Common Council, not only to represent the members of the guild in the election of a mayor and other officers of the city, but also to form a representative body to withstand all encroachments on their liberties and those of the city generally, which the claims and pretensions of Edward III seem to threaten. Side note: petition to regularize proceedings granted 1391. This event preceded a time of great commercial activity, when many political circumstances compelled the city craft guilds to legalize themselves by obtaining from the civic authorities, now so considerably strengthened by the success of the resistance offered to Edward III, a recognition of the practices which for a very lengthy period they had made use of in the conduct of their affairs. Side note: guild officials and their importance. Such an application took place in 1391, during the reign of Richard II, on the part of the Horners Company. The petition was mainly concerned with the recognition of their right to elect 2 wardens to preside over the Horners in accordance with the ancient practice common amongst other guilds. At this time it would appear that there were no masters elected, but that the position of master of a guild was filled either by the alderman of the ward or some other influential and important person, called the guardian, who represented the interests of the craft on the council of the mayor and aldermen. According to Madox, in his Firma Burgi, it would appear that a still earlier form was to elect an alderman and 2 masters for each guild. This will readily account for the fact that some aldermanries were territorial, as in the case of the Knighton Guild, whose ruler was alderman of the Portsoken ward. Others were connected with guilds apart from locality, and possibly some were ecclesiastical or even commercial. A quaint illustration of this practice is found in the confirmation of a Norwich fraternity by Henry V. The members are authorized to elect an alderman and 2 masters, who, when the name of guild was changed to that of craft mystery, became respectively the guardian or alderman and wardens of the mystery. The privilege of electing wardens was always in the forefront of every grant, since it was of great importance to the crafts to have this right at a time when constant efforts were made to put in representatives and nominees of the monarch, in order to bring the crafts, and, through them, the City of London, into subjection. Side note: William Carlisle and Richard Brown. It is highly probable that in 1391 the deputation from the Horners Guild on presenting its petition was introduced by one Richard Brown, Horner, of London, alderman of Aldgate, and master of the guild in 1391. He was not only the guardianus or master of the guild, but a person of great importance during the reign of Richard II, being Horner to the king. His predecessor in the office of alderman, it is interesting to note, was one William Carlisle, master of the Bottle Makers Guild. This fact will help to explain the close relations existing between the 2 crafts. Side note: confiscation of charters and their return in 1397. In a newly discovered MS. of great interest which is being edited by E. H. Ring, Esquire, there appears the following passage, A.D. 1397, 1398. And then after the presentation of the said supplication, from the citizens of London to the king, there were made mony blank charters, and all the men of every craft of the said cité, as well as all manservants and meisters, were charged to come to the Guilde Holly to set her seals to the said blank charters. It must have been from this MS that Stowe gathered much of his information, and this passage was copied by Fabian in 1516, Grafton in 1659, and Hollingshead in 1577. Richard II, furious with the citizens of London for assisting the Duke of Arundel, had taken the opportunity of a brawl in the city, to humiliate the citizens. He confiscated their charters and laid the city under a fine of £1,000,000. This was late in 1397, and the following spring, which until March 25 was AD 1397, and after that date AD 1398, whence possibly the confusion in dates, the city, which, as we have seen, would be the Common Council, more especially as the king had imprisoned the mayor and put in a seustus to govern, bought back the king's favor, and, consequently, their own charters, by the most expensive procession and gifts. All the brethren of each guild, in return for this forgiveness, had to put their seals to these blank charters, which were an acknowledgment of the king's power and their willingness to do and pay what was left in blank in that charter, so that the king could insert what he chose in the blank spaces, or, as Grafton puts it, by which he might, when he would, undo any of his subjects. Amongst the companies called upon to do this was certainly the Horners, who would not have been foolish enough to seal the charters had they not needed the support of the city in the maintaining their own prescriptive rights based on royal grants. The term sealing is quite a natural one, inasmuch as no charters were signed until Tudor times. Side note: renewed activity. Doubtless the troubles of the period and the expenses to which the fraternity had been put, caused the guild to value its rights and to claim further recognition, even to the extent of promoting a special Act of Parliament. They did not seek to obtain a charter, be it noted, which rarely meant any advantage to the unfortunate persons who were practically compelled to accept such charters, but, on the contrary, in most cases proved to be an invasion by the Crown of former prescriptive privileges. The Horners were successful in obtaining a special Act of Parliament in the year 1465. The Act is worth quoting as showing to what importance the Horners Company must have risen by that date. IV Edward IV, c. 8. Side note: the Horners Act. Our sovereign lord the king, perceiving by grievous complaint made in this parliamente, by men of occupation of Horners being enfranchised in the city of London, how that the people of strange lands hath come into this land, and into divers parties thereof, and hath bought by the hands of their hosts and guides, the great and chief stuff of English horns unwrought, of tenors and bowshares, and carry the same over the sea, and there employ the same in divers works, to the great damage of this land and to the final prejudice of a great number of men being of the same occupation, hath by the advice and dissent of the said lords, and at the request of the said commons, and by the authority aforesaid, ordained, established and enacted, that from the feast of Easter, which shall be in the year of our Lord God M.CCCCLXV, no man or stranger nor alien by himself or by any other, shall buy any English horns unwrought of any tenors, bowshares, or any other persons gathered or growing within the said city and, XX 3 miles on every side of the said city next to doing, and that no Englishman nor other person sell any English horns unwrought to any stranger or cause them to be sent over the sea, so that the said Horners will buy the said horns at like prick as they be at the time of the making of this act, upon pain of forfeiture of all such horns so bought, sold, or sent, and that the wardens of the said mystery for the time being by the said authority shall have full power to search all manner where pertaining to their mystery wrought or to be wrought in all places within the said city of London, and XX 3 miles on every side next adjoining to the same city and within the fairs of Sturbridge and Ely in whose hands they may be found. And if they by they research find any such ware or stuff in any place within the said city of London and XX 3 miles next adjoining to the same city or within the fairs of Sturbridge and Ely, in whose hands soever they be to sell, that is defective and insufficient, it shall be lawful to them to take the same ware and stuff, and bring it before the mayor of the same city of London, the mayor and bailiffs of the foresaid fairs for the time being, and the same there being proved effective to be forfeit, the one half thereof to our sovereign lord the king, and the other half to the said wardens, to be ordered at their pleasure. Provided always that after that me of the said occupation within this land have taken out and chosen such as many horns as shall be needful to their occupations, that then it shall be lawful to them all and every of them and other persons of this realm of England, to sell and deliver out the horns refused, which be not able to be occupied in their mystery to any stranger or other persons to send or carry beyond the sea or elsewhere, as shall please them. Side note: bottle makers absorbed by foreigners in 1477. This Act of Parliament must have proved of great benefit to the foreigners, but with it came greater demands from the company on the part of the king and the city. The frugal minds of the craft rulers at once saw the advantage of paying one set of assessments instead of two, and asked that in future the foreigners and bottle makers might be treated as one company, and not be called upon to pay the shares of two separate companies. Thus the prosperity of the foreigners, coupled with the increasing demands for money made on the city guilds, led to the union of the foreigners and bottle makers just 12 years after the passing of the Foreigners Act, _A.E. in 1477, 16th year of Edward IV. Facts indicating in no uncertain way that the foreigners must have been very firmly established and legally constituted at the time, both in order to make the assessments possible as well as to give them the right to absorb the bottle makers. Side note: Deeds of Agreement. Side note: Deed of 1590. Side note: Deed of 1599. In the reign of Elizabeth we find the Foreigners Company carrying on its work as a joint stock company. The stock being held in shares or half shares, it therefore became necessary to place the wardens, who alone had under the act just mentioned, power to purchase horns, under some agreement to do so only for and on behalf of the members of the guild. No doubt many such deeds were executed, but amongst the archives of the company there are still two extant, the one dated 1590 and the other 1599. The parties to the deed are the wardens and the rest of the members. The wardens therein bind themselves to buy, and the other members not to buy, horns in London or 24 miles round. The horns bought by the wardens are to be purchased for the use of the whole company and to be divided equally between them by the wardens. In the deed of 1599 the limit within which the purchase and sale of horns was prohibited was altered from 24 to 100 miles, next in and about the city of London. Side note: Horn industry and English secret. From a document in the possession of the company it would appear that the horn industry was, during the 15th century at least, an English monopoly, and from the official documents of Germany, Holland and France the writer has been unable to discover a single record of such an industry existing before 1600. The following interesting sentence from a document which is dated 1455, 33rd year of Henry VI, illustrates the contention. Inasmuch as the making of horns and other works pertaining unto the said mystery be not perfectly had nor known in any region or place of the world, except in this land only, which causeth the people of other lands and places to resort and repair unto this city for horns yearly, unto the great profit and worship of the same city, whereas if such people of strange lands might clearly and perfectly understand the cunning and feat of making of such English horns, would not heat or repair yearly to buy such English chaffer, etc. Consequently, the wardens were expressly authorized the same year by the mayor and aldermen to punish any who should reveal the secret of the craft to any stranger. Side note: exportation of horns. So valuable a trade, however, could not remain long unknown to the continental nations, who were, in other respects, far in advance of England, and consequently the demand for English horns on the continent became so great that, in spite of the act forbidding the export of horns, the members of the guild seem to have done a considerable trade in exporting horns, on the excuse that they were refuse horns. Indeed, so profitable did they find this traffic that, about 1590, two city men, the one a merchant and the other a scrivener, entered into competition with them and managed to secure from Queen Elizabeth, no doubt for a substantial payment, permission to export horns to the continent, though not themselves members of the Horners' Company. Side note: competition by Furner and Crayford. The controversy which this occasioned between the Horners and their opponents, Simon Furner and John Crayford, is to be found amongst the records in the manuscript department of the British Museum. Lord Burleigh attempted to bring about a compromise, and instructed a Mr. Carmarthen to endeavour to arrive at some arrangement between the contending parties, but in vain. The issue at stake was a vital one. The Horners claimed exclusive privileges under some charter which they were evidently able to produce, accorded them by one of the kings of England, whilst Messrs. Furner and Crayford argued their privileges under the letters patent granted by the Queen. It would seem that the wealth and influences behind the private adventurers were stronger than those of the company, which was already beginning to feel the pressure of competition from the pouchmakers and leather sellers, who dealt in the same kinds of wares, as well as from the introduction of glass vessels, etc., which took place in the 16th century. Side note: withdrawal from public life. From the year 1455 onwards, the Horners seem to have fallen into the background and to have disappeared from the arena of public life. This is not altogether to be wondered at, for, towards the end of the 15th century, and for nearly 200 years after, city crafts or mysteries were the object of predatory attacks of so deadly a character, that though in 1455 we find 48 crafts openly representing the city, in 1575 only 28 companies were to be found on whom the assessment for wheat could be placed. What the remaining mysteries did is difficult to say, but no doubt they attempted to carry on their work unnoticed, either urging prescriptive rights, or claiming none, in order to avoid spoliation. Side note: Horners forced to reappear. The once important trade, but now the little craft of Horners, was evidently in this category, and had it not been for the necessity of fighting for very existence, when the export of horns was making their trade impossible by the increase in price of the raw material, they doubtless would have preferred to keep in the background, even at the end of Queen Elizabeth's reign. This contention would seem the more reasonable from the fact that had not the previous charters or royal grants to the Horners' Company been of very ancient date, and, consequently, almost forgotten, and had that craft not been, as it were, keeping from the glare of public observation in order to avoid the cost of inspeximus, it is unlikely that the advisers of Queen Elizabeth would have laid her open to the controversy which the grant of letters patent to Furner and Crayford was bound to produce. Side note: 1604. Repeal of Horners Act. Side note: Petition to Parliament, 1610, and revival of Horners Act. It must have been a great blow to the company when, in the first year of the reign of James A., an Act c. 25 was passed which repealed the statute of 4 Edward IV, but in the 7th year of that king's reign the Horners presented their petition to Parliament, stating that by reason of the repeal of the prohibition, the company had grown so poor and decayed, as in a short time, if remedy be not provided, they and theirs shall be utterly undone, and the act is thereby revived except as to the powers of search in Stourbridge and Ely fairs, and a limitation of the price of horns thereby secured. A penalty was imposed of double the value of English horns sold unwrought to any stranger or sent over the sea, 1 moiety of the penalty to go to the informer and 1 moiety to the king. Side note: 1627. Letters patent from the king. Notwithstanding this statute, the exportation of horns still continued, and letters patent were granted by King Charles I in the 3rd year of his reign, 1627, again prohibiting the exportation of horns until the company should first have made choice of the best and most convenient number of the horns to supply the necessary occasions of the realm. In spite of the protection afforded by these acts and letters patent, the exportation of horns continued. Side note: Evil days. Side note: 1635. New orders allowed. These were evil days for the horner's craft, and it would appear that the horners themselves were not entirely guiltless in the matter. Consequently, in 1635, to stem the tide of ill fortune which seemed to have set in, the company approached the mayor and aldermen to give them fresh rules for the reformation of the craft. The following rules were allowed and confirmed by the then Lord Mayor, Christopher Clitheroe. 0. Horns to be bought for the general good. 0. None to buy horns within 20 miles of London. 0. Everyone to pay for his share as the wardens shall think fit. 0. None to keep above 1 apprentice, except he hath been a partner or sharer with the said company 7 years at least, in which case he may keep 2 apprentices. 0. Apprentices shall be bound. 0. No one to be set to work at the trade unless he have served 7 years. 0. Every journeyman to serve 2 years after having been made free of the company. 0. None to enter for their shares until called by the wardens. 0. Anyone elected a warden must serve the office or pay a fine of 20 shillings. 0. None shall sue or arrest another without permission from the wardens. 0. The wardens may commit offenders to prison with the consent of the mayor. For 2 years the company exercised their powers under these new rules, but still harder times were in store for the company. Side note: Further troubles. Whether as the result of an information laid by some member who was suffering under these stringent regulations, or, as would appear most probable, the king's growing need of money to carry on the coming political struggle between himself and his people, the horners were suddenly discovered to be acting illegally, under the powers conferred by the Act of 19 Henry VII, which was no doubt revived for the purpose. No master, wardens, or companies could make any acts or ordinances except such as should be approved by the Chancellor and Treasurer of England or Chief Justice of either bench, or 3 of them. Side note: The legal plight of the company. Though doubtless this act was never intended to apply to alterations or additions to regulations already in force, but rather to the establishment of new companies, it became necessary for the horners to comply with the regulations, and though it does not transpire whether they were compelled to pay any fines or not, they finally obtained confirmation of their new rules under the hands of Thomas Coventry, Lord Chancellor, and Chief Justices John Branston and John Finch, but not until after they applied for and obtained a royal charter, and as Charles I, in order to assert sovereign rights, was unwilling to admit ancient prescriptive claims, care was taken to justify this subversion of the ancient rights of the guild, by stating in the charter that the horners had never been incorporated. Side note: Grave parallel. Side note: Difficulty evaded by purchase of new charter. The examination of the new rules by the judges just mentioned had revealed the fact that the horners were a joint stock company holding property in perpetuity in opposition to the Statute of Mortmain. Here was a splendid opportunity for the king to reap a harvest, and nothing remained for the authorities of the company but to obtain a charter as soon as possible and to avoid the heavy penalties to which they would otherwise be subjected by assenting to the legal fiction that they had not acted as a corporation, and never had been one, but merely an association in existence from year to year, acting under ancient and well-recognized privileges. Whether this claim was technically correct or not, the antiquity of the company was so great and the process of proving any breach so lengthy and difficult that no doubt Charles I thought it best to take the cash payment which always accompanied grants in so close the matter. Thus the Charter of 1638, which is the only one now extant, was obtained, and the proceedings of the company as a joint stock concern holding property in perpetuity were again legalized, though doubtless long before that time the right to hold property and to do all that was required of them as a craft guild had been regularly accorded to the members in the persons of their several guardians. Side note: charters of little value in determining dates of origin. Like many other city companies, the Horners have been accustomed to believe that this charter, which in its preamble for obvious reasons takes for granted no previous charter, was the first and only legal instrument authorizing them to carry on their work as a guild. Very little reliance, however, is to be placed on the statements of the charters of this period, which were often little more than a temporary instrument of protection against further encroachments on their resources and powers by the ruling monarch. For this very uncertain privilege large sums had to be paid, sums wrung again and again from the unfortunate city guilds by threats of suppression. It is more than probable that at all times charters were freely purchasable by those who could afford to pay for them, and, having served their particular purpose, were as easily lost or mislaid. For all practical purposes, however, until the 16th century at least, they offer no indication whatever of the antiquity of any company, even where they seem to state in the preamble that there has been no previous charter, a statement which should be taken only to indicate that the sovereign granting the charter wishes it to be supposed that he, and he alone, is the person to whom the company is indebted for its privileges which often existed only in name. In many cases the charters were really encroachments by the state on the ancient privileges which had been inherited from the earliest times, and which were supported by municipal law, against which state law waged continuous warfare. Side note: previous incorporations. It is widely held by students who are not satisfied to be merely superficial that in very early days aggregate bodies were deemed to have perpetual succession without being incorporated. When the king granted to a set of men to be a mercantile community, assembly, or meeting, this was considered sufficient to incorporate them. As illustrating this virtual incorporation, we may note the words of the eminent jurist, Dr. Williams, in his Law of the Universities, published only last year. He says, "A corporation, the creature of the crown, may exist by charter or prescription, which presumes a charter, even in cases where historical evidence makes it morally certain that no charters ever existed. Consequently, in the charters of Edward III, which meant little and were but a receipt for moneys loaned or given, there is no provision for a common seal, liberty to accept or buy land, or to sue and be sued, etc., all these being naturally taken for granted in the case of guilds or similar organizations then existing. It is no doubt true that in the reign of Edward III craft guilds were generally chartered, _a.e. had their privileges confirmed by letters patent, yet, in still earlier days, as well as after the death of Edward III, it would seem that these bodies exercised their functions under special protection or on sufferance, probably always in return for their firms or annual payment to the king." Side note: Horners never an adulteran guild. If further illustration were required, to demonstrate how great is the right of the Horners Company to rank amongst the earliest of the acknowledged trade guilds, that proof is to be found in the study of what are known as adulteran guilds. These were unwarranted or unlicensed guilds, and from time to time were heavily fined. There is no mention, however, of the Horners having been among such guilds thus swooped down upon by the king, though lists are given of those who were mulcted from the 12th century. The Horners could not have escaped had they been unwarranted at the time, and must, therefore, have possessed indisputable rights. Reference has been made to Richard Browne and William Carlyle. Side note: royal grants must have existed. Richard Browne, we read, was one whom the king retained to serve him with horns and other things pertaining to his mystery, and to whom was granted the king's livery of clothing every year, in the great wardrobe, as other Horners of his condition had been wont to receive. Thus William Carlyle was a man of considerable importance in his own time, and a man of great wealth. To suppose that so important a craft guild, under the patronage of such influential persons, would neglect to arm itself with every possible weapon of defense, such as grants and charters, is to suppose the impossible, and, indeed, in the year 1455, towards the end of the reign of Henry VI, on petitioning to have further powers of administration conferred upon it, this guild is expressly mentioned as having been already enfranchised in the city of London, a proceeding which could not possibly have been accomplished without something in the nature of a royal grant. It would seem that owing to the very great antiquity of the Horners' Company, it held certain prescriptive privileges originally obtained by it or its guardians in exchange for certain goods from time to time supplied to the royal household, and on this point further light may still be thrown. One such instance has come to light. Either the company or the guardians in his official capacity as Horner to the king, would provide the horn comb used at the coronation of every sovereign until the time of Charles II. We have evidence that amongst the coronation relics connected with Charles I which were sold, was a horn comb. This, in accordance with the practice even now in vogue at the consecration of Roman Catholic bishops, was used ceremonially after anointing the king's head with oil. Side note: proof of earlier charter. As a culminating proof that the Caroline Charter was not the first and only royal grant held by the Horners' Company, we have but to turn to the correspondence recently found in the British Museum, and it will at once become evident that the Horners were possessed of a charter long before 1638. Mr. Carmarthen, writing to Lord Burleigh in 1597, says, "The question resteth upon one word chiefly in their charter, etc., or, again, by the king's grant in their charter, etc. This may allude to a charter granted by Edward IV, or, as seems probable, that in reality the Cornuarii were well established as a legalized guild certainly not later than Richard II, and, in all probability, owned charters of a much earlier date, which would be in the nature of special grants to the guardian of the guild, held by him, and would therefore at a later period not necessarily be in the possession of the company. Moreover, on 30th of March, 1815, the clerk of the company stated, as appears by an entry in the minute book, that he had opened and examined the chest containing the documents relating to the company, and he found that it contained also the original charters granted for establishing the company, etc. Had there been but one, it is improbable that the word would have been used in the plural. Thus it will be seen that the Charter of 1638 is but an instrument reiterating and once more legalizing the acts which had been in vogue amongst the Horners for a very considerable time. Side note: 1638. Charter of Charles I. The Charter of Charles I provides that the Horners, free men of the City of London and Westminster and liberties and suburbs of the same, are incorporated by the name of Master, Wardens, Assistants, and Fellowship of the Mystery of Horners of the City of London, with power to purchase and hold freehold and leasehold estates of every kind and all manner of goods and chattels, and to grant, alien and dispose of the same, and by the same name to plead and be impleaded, and to have a common seal. One of the said fellowship is to be chosen the master, 2 to be chosen wardens, and 10 or more of the fellowship assistants. The master, wardens and assistants, or the greater part of them, whereof the master and one of the wardens are always to be two, have power to make and alter, amend or make new, reasonable laws and constitutions touching the trade, art, or mystery, and for punishment and reformation of abuses, wrongful practices and misdemeanors, and for defraying the charges of maintaining and continuing the corporation, and after what order they shall demean themselves in their office mystery and work, and to impose such fines, amerciaments, or other lawful punishments upon all offenders as shall seem necessary, such fines, etc., to be raised for their own uses. Robert Baker was appointed the first master to continue in office until the 2nd February, 1638, and until another person was elected in his place. Christopher Peel and Thomas White were appointed first wardens under the new rules and charter. 10 brethren were appointed the first assistants during their lives or good behavior, and the master and wardens were upon retirement from their offices, to be assistants in the same manner. The master and wardens were to take oaths before the master in chancery to well and truly execute their offices before entering upon the same. Power is given to the master, wardens, assistants, and fellowship to meet in their common hall or other convenient place upon the 2nd of February, if it be not Sunday, and if it be Sunday, then upon the next day after, to elect a master and 2 wardens for the ensuing year, and there to take their oaths of office before the late master and wardens, or 2 of them, and like power of election is given until the next 2nd of February in case of the death or removal for misbehavior of any master or warden during his term of office, and also in like manner to elect an assistant on the death or removal of any of the assistants appointed by the charter. Power is given of oversight, rule and search of all persons occupying, importing, exporting, or using the art or mystery of foreigners within the cities of London and Westminster, and the liberties and precincts thereof, and of all manner of wares thereunto appertaining, to the intent that all delinquents may be discovered and punished. They may purchase forever one house for a hall not exceeding the yearly value of £40. They are to elect one honest and discreet person as clerk, and also appoint the beadle. Side note: Exercise of Rights, 1689. Side note: Buying horns, 1739. The control continuously exercised by the company over the trade, and finally secured to them in the charter just mentioned, has never been abandoned, though at any rate for the present it is not exercised. In the first year of William III, 1689, the Horners' Company successfully prosecuted a comb maker for pressing horns, he not being a horner. Maitland, who published his work in 1739, tells us that the company had of late appointed divers of their members to attend the market of Leadenhall and those of the neighboring counties for the buying of horns to be sent to their common warehouse in Wentworth Street, Spitalfields, where they were made up into lots and divided amongst the several members, not omitting the widows and orphans, who also received their several shares. Side note: Lashed legal claim, 1745. Side note: Ceases as a trading body. The last occasion on which the court exercised its rights against persons infringing its monopoly was in the year 1745. Having ascertained that certain persons not free of the company had bought rough horns and pressed them into lantern leaves, and were disposing of them within the city of London and 24 miles distant, proceedings were ordered to be taken against them, and, as a result, the company successfully established its right to the monopoly in the manufacture of horn work in the city of London and 24 miles round. From that time forward the trade in horn declined, and during the second half of the 18th century, the company finally ceased to be a trading community. Thus ended the operative existence of a craft guild which from time out of mind until the present moment has had a useful and honorable career. The Horners' Company has been practically contemporaneous with the history of England, and is, it may be believed, still destined to serve many a useful purpose. Side note: Property. In spite of legal incorporation, the property of the company has, from time to time, been vested in certain trustees, the last trust deed being dated 1756. Side note, minutes. Side note, annual dinner. The earliest minute book in the possession of the company covers the period 1731 to 1796, and is extremely interesting as showing the care taken in the apprenticing of novices to the trade, in the appointment of its officers, and, perhaps most of all, in the unbroken continuity of the annual dinner held generally at some place outside the city, which though, at the time, partaken of only by the members of the court, represented the annual feast of the medieval guilds, and finds its successor today in the livery dinner, which has become almost a matter of civic importance. This ancient practice has long been associated with trade guilds, certainly as far back as 700 BC. We may believe that the _type or feast of the _hetairoi or Greek trade guilds must have had a long history before the time when such distinguished members as Lysimachus, son of Milesius, and the son of Thucydides, joined in them. Side note, favored inns. During the 18th and first part of the 19th century, the favored inns selected for the annual dinner seem to have been the Crown and Sceptre at Greenwich, the Plough or Folly House, Blackwall, the Star and Garter, Richmond, and, in much later days, the North and South American Coffee House, which the latter, however, was probably used more for the ordinary meetings of the company than for the annual dinner. Side note, Aldgate, the Horners' home. It is a little difficult to define the area in which the Horners of London were originally located, but it may be somewhat vaguely described as the district of Aldgate. Many were the streets and alleys to which Horners have given a name, and one well-known Horn alley was, until a comparatively late date, to be found on the east side of Bishopsgate Street, and in Cornman's book on Old Street Signs and Tablets is an allusion to one with the following inscription: "This is Horn Alley, 1670. In Stowe's Survey of London, 1633, the following passage occurs. I read in the 26th of Henry VI, 1447, that in the parish of St. Dunstan's in the east a tenement called Horner's Quay was granted to William Harrington, Esq. Doubtless this alludes to a building used by the Horners for the purposes of their trade, at a time when all was _couleur de rose with them, and it is extremely likely that upon further investigation this William Harrington will be found to be the guardianus or alderman of the guild. Side note, the warehouses of the guild. Time, however, brought its changes, and when, in 1603-4, the Horners Act was repealed, it would seem likely that they found it either impossible to continue to pay the rent, or, realizing that disaster awaited them, may have sold the property, if it were theirs to sell. It is, however, certain that in 1604 the company leased a house with storehouses and sheds in Wentworth Street, Whitechapel, for the term of 1,000 years at a ground rent of £4. When, in 1789, these premises were no longer required for the use of the trade, which had declined, they were let for £30 a year, and in 1879 were sold to the Metropolitan Board of Works and the money invested on behalf of the Horners Company. Side note, was there a Horners Hall? It has been stated that the Horners Company never had a hall. It is difficult to see quite why this statement has been made, for there is much to make the student of guild lore think otherwise. The Charter of 1638 expressly provides for one, and, as in every other respect, it simply imposes the absolute conditions then existing. There would seem no reason to doubt that the sum of £40 per annum therein mentioned was the exact value of the property then held. The bottle makers would not have joined the Horners had the latter company not had a hall or meeting place. As with other craft guilds, the fire of London probably proved very disastrous to the company, and, no doubt, very little was saved. The fact that there are hardly any deeds of importance anterior to 1666, that the old book of the company, which has recently been recovered, after wandering so long, ceases to have an entry after 1636, together with the fact that the 2 or 3 early deeds which antedate the fire of London are in a deplorable condition, as well as the fact that the company owned a considerable amount of silver plate, which was sold in 1789, makes it not improbable that the Horners, like every other city guild, had its regular hall or meeting place. Side note: Arms. The coat of arms of the company is R. On a chevron SA, 3 bugles of the first between 3 leather bottles of the second. Side note: Destruction of guild monopolies. In 1835 the Municipal Corporations Act gave the coup de grace to any remnants of monopoly exercised by the extant city guilds. That act gave liberty to all either to buy or sell, and, by so doing, compelled most of the city companies, nolens volens, to seek for a sphere of usefulness in other directions. Side note: 1837. Revived importance. Though, as a trading guild, the Horners Company declined, it has steadily risen in reputation as one of the ancient mysteries of the City of London, and, in 1837, the Commissioners on Municipal Corporations classed it as 54th out of 89 companies there enumerated. In 1846 the company petitioned the Court of Aldermen for a livery which was granted them, the number of liverymen being limited to 60. Side note: 1882. Exhibition of horn work. In 1882 the Court of the Horners Company organized an exhibition of horn work, both ancient and modern, which was held by the kindness of the then Lord Mayor, Sir Henry Knight, at the Mansion House. By a strange coincidence, and without any premeditation on the part either of the Lord Mayor or the company, it was held on October the 18th, St. Luke's Day, which was the day on which the annual Horn Fair at Charlton took place. The exhibition of horns and hornwork far exceeded, both as regards quantity and quality, the most sanguine expectations of the promoters. So great was the interest shown by the public that it became necessary to keep it open for an extra day, and, during the 4 days of the exhibition, it was visited by no fewer than 7,000 persons. Amongst the exhibitors was Her Most Gracious Majesty the late Queen Victoria, who sent some interesting specimens from her treasures at Windsor Castle. In acknowledgment of Her Majesty's kind consideration, and by her gracious permission, the company presented to Her Majesty a print of the descriptive catalogue and the account of the company mentioned in the preface, bound in horn leaves, ornamented with a beautiful design from the South Kensington School of Art, selected after competition by the scholars. It is now in the King's private suite of rooms at Windsor Castle. Side note: 1900. Royal Casket. In the course of the year 1900, at the instance of Mr. A.W. Timbrell, C.C., it was decided to present Queen Victoria with a horn casket in order to fittingly commemorate the new century. On being approached upon the subject, Her Majesty graciously accepted the offer. Before, however, the presentation could be made, her lamented death occurred. It was then decided to present the casket to King Edward, and on March 28, 1901, the late King's Secretary wrote to the clerk of the company expressing His Majesty's pleasure in accepting the proposed gift. The casket was made of selected specimens of the finest British bullock horn, mounted with massive silver and gilt straps, and ornaments of the early English style of chasing. It is supported upon 4 pierced feet, the whole resting upon an ebony plinth, upon which is a silver plate bearing the names of the master, the wardens, and the clerk. The whole enclosed in a handsome morocco case, forms one of the finest specimens of the Horner's art. Sir Francis Knollys, in acknowledging the presentation, stated that he was commanded by the King to renew the expressions of His Majesty's thanks to the Worshipful Company of Horners for the casket which they had presented to him, and that His Majesty admired it greatly and considered that it would form a great addition to the horn room at Osborne. Side note: another royal casket. A similar casket, slightly different in design, was presented to His Majesty King George V on the occasion of his coronation, and this, like the one presented to his revered father, has been designed and carried out by Mr. Deputy Miller Wilkinson, of Cornhill, the present father of the court. Illustration: casket presented to King George V. It was constructed in the form of a cigar box, mounted with finely worked silver gilt applied strapwork, chased with lions' heads and dolphins, chased end handles. On the front is a circular plaque representing the arms of the Horners Company. The casket is surmounted by a figure of St. George and the Dragon, the whole resting upon an ebony plinth, upon which is a silver gilt plate bearing the names of the master, the wardens, and the clerk. Enclosed in a handsome red morocco case, it forms a beautiful and unique specimen of the Horners' art. The deputation which made the presentation was headed by the Worshipful Master, who, in the course of his address to His Majesty, said, "The Horners Company, which is one of the most ancient of the city guilds, in tendering the casket, desire to assure your Majesty of their loyalty to your throne in person, and convey their respectful wishes for a long and prosperous reign." The king, in receiving the casket, remarked that it was a very beautiful piece of workmanship, and that he would value it the more inasmuch as it was presented to him during his coronation year. Side note: further increase in livery. In consequence of the continued prosperity of the Horners Company, due to many causes, doubtless, at a time when little life was being evinced to the work of Mr. James Curtis, but especially in the present activity of its esteemed clerk, Mr. Howard Dayton, it was found necessary in 1905 to apply again to the Court of Aldermen for an increase in the livery to the number of 100, which was granted subject to the livery fine being increased to £30. _sic floor and cornwary. Illustration: colophon. Transcriber's note: punctuation has been normalized. Variations in hyphenation have been retained as they were in the original publication. Italicized phrases are presented by surrounding the text with underscores. End of the Project Gutenberg ebook of A Short History of the Worshipful Company of Horners, by H.G. Rosedale. End of this Project Gutenberg ebook Short History, Company of Horners This file should be named 53820-0.txt or 53820-0.zip. This and all associated files of various formats will be found in http://www.gutenberg.org/5/3/8/2/53820/ Produced by the online distributed proofreading team at http://www.pgdp.net. This file was produced from images generously made available by the Internet Archive. Updated editions will replace the previous one. The old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg-Tm concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for the ebooks, unless you receive specific permission. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the rules is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances and research. They may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work. To protect the Project Gutenberg-Tm mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works by using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg, you agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg-Tm license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use in Redistributing Project Gutenberg-Tm Electronic Works. 1.a. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark copyright agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation, or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg-Tm mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg-Tm works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg-Tm name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg-Tm license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg-Tm work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country outside the United States. 1.e. Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg. 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg-Tm license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg-Tm work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you'll have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg-Tm trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg-Tm license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg-Tm license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg-Tm. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg-Tm license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg-Tm work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg-Tm website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original, plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg-Tm license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg-Tm works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg-Tm works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg-Tm trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg-Tm license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg-Tm works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or replacement copy if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg-Tm works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from both the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and the Project Gutenberg Trademark LLC, the owner of the Project Gutenberg-Tm trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f 1.f.1 Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg-Tm collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects, such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2 Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages. Except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg-Tm trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3 Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4 Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you, ASs, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5 Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6 Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the Foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the Foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion and distribution of Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg-Tm work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg-Tm work. And C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg-Tm. Project Gutenberg-Tm is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg-Tm's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg-Tm collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg-Tm and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 in the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501c3 educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's EIN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 6462215541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's principal office is in Fairbanks, Alaska, with the mailing address P.O. Box 750,175, Fairbanks, Alaska 99775, but its volunteers and employees are scattered throughout numerous locations. Its business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, Utah 84116, 801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact. For additional contact information, Dr. Gregory B. Newby, Chief Executive and Director, GBNEWBY, at pglaf.org. Section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg-Tm depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform, and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg-Tm electronic works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg-Tm concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg-Tm ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg-Tm ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the US unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg-Tm, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks.